People generally assume a photograph is a transparent slice of time, a perfect, objective window into a past event. Take Berlin, 2014. 6,000 citizens blocked a neo-Nazi march. Riot police used batons. On the surface, it's a straightforward record of state power, but the meaning shifts at the periphery. On the right side, a bystander captures the clash on a smartphone. Susan Sontag identified this as an act of appropriation. The operator claims a specific relation to the world, one of knowledge and, by extension, power. The camera itself is an aggressive technology. Its insatiability changes the terms of our world, dictating a specific ethics of seeing. To understand history, we must deconstruct the visual archive. We can do this by applying the critical frameworks developed by Sontag and historian Jennifer Evans. If we continue to treat constructed, framed snapshots as pure truth, we surrender our understanding to the aesthetic choices of the person holding the lens. The vocabulary of photography reveals its mechanical nature. We load, we aim, we shoot. Sontag observed the camera acts as a subliminated gun. It is a predatory tool turning people into objects that can be symbolically possessed. This atomizes reality, severing a fraction of a second from its historical timeline into an isolated particle. Because a photograph only provides the surface of an event, it hides its deeper historical functioning. We see the injury, but not the policy or the movement that caused it. Understanding requires narrative and time, elements a still photograph destroys by freezing the subject. The camera fragments reality. It rewards the viewer with a dangerous, unearned illusion of knowledge. There is a common belief that photographs hold unique moral value. We expect documenting atrocity will naturally awaken the public conscience. A rare, novel image of suffering can shock a naive viewer, stripping away their detachment and forcing them to confront an unimaginable reality. But as Krakauer noted, we live inside a blizzard of images. This constant mass proliferation of visual data creates the default state of media consumption. This leads to the empathy paradox. Repeated exposure to images of horror anesthetizes the public, rather than mobilizing them. The horrible becomes ordinary. Ethical engagement degrades into a social rite of voyeurism. The image becomes a souvenir of an experience we did not have. Jennifer Evans provides a historical test case for this paradox: the portraits of facially wounded soldiers from the First World War. These images were originally produced as medical records. The clinical, isolated framing was intended to document advances in surgical rehabilitation. Sequestered in medical journals, these photographs failed to generate a widespread civic response or any significant sense of empathy for the casualties of war. The raw visual content of suffering is insufficient to guarantee a moral reaction from the viewer. If the image itself does not dictate meaning, the historian is faced with a dilemma. How do we interpret visual evidence? We have to track the physical relocation of those wounded soldier portraits after the war ended. Years later, anti-war activists extracted these medical images and repurposed them. They placed the faces of the wounded on protest placards. This new public context transformed the failed medical record into a devastating emotional weapon against militarism. Photographic meaning is fluid. It relies on where the image is displayed and how it circulates within a culture. The ethical impact of a photograph is never inherent in its pixels. It is constructed by the hands of those who curate and distribute it. Let's return to the Berlin protest photo to decode it as a historian would. We analyze the image through the three registers established by Julia Adeny Thomas and Jennifer Evans. The first register is the presentational. We look at what is literally framed within the borders of the photograph. In this photo, the presentational layer is a depiction of force, the physical presence of state power pinning a civilian to the ground. The second register we must consider is the contextual. We ask how the image traveled through the world. This image was uploaded to Flickr and categorized with specific hashtags. It was consumed by an anti-fascist digital network, turning it into evidence for a political community. Finally, the third register is the aesthetic. We analyze how the composition trains the eye to judge the subject. The stark black and white contrast and gritty style mimic 20th century photojournalism. This aesthetic choice cues the viewer to trust the image as an objective historical truth. Sontag left us with a severe warning. Strictly speaking, one never understands anything from looking at a photograph. However, the historian cannot simply abandon the visual archive. The manipulative nature of the image is precisely what makes it valuable. True visual literacy begins when we reject the naive acceptance of images as mirrors of reality. Every photograph is an inexhaustible invitation to deduction and structural analysis. In a world ruled by a blizzard of images, true historical sight requires a shift in perspective. We must stop being passive voyeurs and start actively interrogating the frame.